Conference. Having titled our recent inaugural event, which I see many of you were at, the New Canadian Voice for Reason, Science and Secularism, I think it's extremely appropriate that we now have the opportunity to explore the origins and history of the free thought movement as we launch this new exciting endeavor. The Robert Greene Ingersol Conference on the History of Free Thought in Canada and the US has brought together for the first time a real mixture of speakers from two nations. Similar conferences dedicated to Robert Ingersoll used to be held in the Finger Lakes region up until 2001, I'm told. We think it fitting that with the recent rise in influence of the modern free thought and our atheist movements, as we enter into what we all hope is a new golden age for free thought, that it was fitting to take the opportunity to explore the first such golden age, to learn from our predecessors, to better understand what went right, what went wrong, and perhaps why it is we were unable then to sustain the momentum. Based on the exciting presentations before us today, these are the big issues I hope we will be able to discuss together during lunch and dinner sessions. Before proceeding as Director of the Centre for Inquiry Ontario, allow me to mention a few words on behalf of CFI. We are a young branch here, having celebrated our inaugural merely 2 months ago on this past Thursday. As our nation's first venue dedicated to humanists and freethinkers, our goals are correspondingly lofty, and our mandate encompasses 5 areas. First, we have our programming initiative, to build a robust public education and lecture series throughout Ontario, as well as conferences and seminars featuring leading humanist speakers such as those presented to you today. We have so far hosted 10 major events here and at over 7 campuses in the area. Our next presentation, which is set for June 1st, which I'll give a brief plug to, is going to be called Discourse Over Dogma. And we'll defend free expression and free inquiry by featuring 3 individuals targeted for their dissenting viewpoints, including Tariq Fatah, founder and former spokesperson for the Muslim Canadian Congress, who was forced to step down due to risks to him and his family based on positions taken in defense of gay marriage and against Islamic Sharia law. We invite you all to that presentation on June 1st. Secondly, and relatedly, CFI Ontario engages in campus outreach to continue to push the free thought movement by generating new student groups across Canada, and to lend support and resources to our growing network of student groups, which currently includes 12 recognized groups and 6 developing communities in Ontario and Quebec. Thirdly, we are proud to sponsor a community outreach initiative through which we have begun to connect with literary, environmental, and entertainment organizations in Toronto, as well as social service support groups for our members, such as our Secular Sobriety Group and our Coping with Our Religion support group. Fourthly, and we're almost done here, CFI Ontario has built for itself a lending library, seen behind you, of over 1,000 books and media items, as well as a media center from which we broadcast educational material online, support national web conferencing, and engage in other outreach and organizing. And finally, we are striving to become recognized as a community center for the non-religious by providing lounge space open 7 days a week, 8 hours a day, and through bi-daily social events, discussions and hobby groups, and film nights. This summer we will be holding monthly spaghetti dinners, barbecue and film screenings, and a coffeehouse entertainment event, in addition to our regular programming. To keep updated on these exciting initiatives, please be sure to sign our guest list on the table behind Peter with your full contact information. There are also a number of CFI Ontario volunteers present who are all proudly wearing their volunteer, says volunteer on their name tags. In addition to myself, you may ask any of us for information, for questions and comments. If you do support our mission, I urge you to consider getting involved as a volunteer at the Centre or joining formally as a friend of the Centre, a membership program with incentives like free events, conference discounts, and reduced rates on books and magazines, but which more importantly represents your appreciation for the history of free thought and your commitment to its future. Which brings me quite nicely back to the theme of today's conference. As Richard Dawkins said just this week on CBC's The Hour, referring mostly to the US political scene, we hope we are now coming down what in the far future will turn out to have been but a minor blip in the ultimate road of secular and free thought progress. Taking that concept, if we chart this progress in scientific and rationalist thought broadly over the last half a millennia, we find an interesting pattern of ripples involving movement and counter-movements. The early Renaissance was the first time in the remotely modern period that individualistic and humanistic thinking began to emerge, mostly from religious circles, to be followed by the backlash of the Counter-Reformation, the Spanish and Roman Inquisitions, and the wars of religion in the 16th and 17th century Western Europe. The next flowering of reason, science, and rationality was the Age of Enlightenment, roughly 200 years later, again followed by wars like the Napoleonic War and philosophical and religious counter-movements like Romanticism and Revivalism. This is where Robert Ingersoll enters. His father, the Reverend John Ingersoll, was a Presbyterian minister and revivalist who preached the Word of God alongside abolitionism in the communities throughout New York, Ohio, and Wisconsin in the middle 19th century. His son, Robert Greene Ingersoll, would prove to be the leading orator of the golden age of free thought, period from around 1870 into the early 20th century. Susan Jacoby, in her book Free Thinkers, A History of American Secularism, places the end of the golden age of free thought at World War I, in line with the developing trend we see between the emergence of war and the rise of religiosity. Since the end of the World Wars, and the emergence of the secular democratic nation-states, we have seen the rise of post-Christian Europe and the unprecedented acceptance of atheism throughout much of the West. Needless to say, the late 20th century experienced a fundamentalist surge in the US, but we hope, as Dawkins said, that we are now on the other side of that unfortunate blip, and that we are entering into a new sort of golden age. I think it's crucial to notice, though, how the process of movement and counter-movement seems to have accelerated since we came out of the Middle Ages, a hopeful and progressive sign. I skipped quickly over Ingersol in order to put things into perspective and paint a broad, big picture of free thought history, to keep in mind as we explore the golden age of free thought in particular, and later discuss how that period fits together with its own historical foundations, the current era, and how we can learn from our past at this crucial point. And now to start, we'll return to the focus of this conference, starting with a presentation by Tom Flynn, co-organizer of today's conference, which will examine the historical context of Ingersol, specifically, as well as related free thought history from the West Central New York region, the area of Ingersol's birth. Tom Flynn is editor of Free Inquiry magazine, co-founder of the newsletter Secular Humanist Bulletin, and designed and now directs the Robert Green Ingersoll Birthplace Museum. The orientation video he created for the museum in 2003 was in fact named Best Documentary in an Industry Awards contest. He's an author of 3 books and editor of the forthcoming new Encyclopedia of Unbelief that we all look very forward to reading very shortly. Please help me welcome Tom Flynn.
Thank you, Justin. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. Let me just get a couple of things together. Where did the magic mouse go? There it is. Okay, the title slide is always weird. Make sure that the thing actually works. And nothing's happening. There we are. Okay. Well, it's great to be here. Some of you know Robert Ingersoll had the peculiar distinction of being both an outspoken agnostic and also the most prominent political speechmaker for the U.S. Republican Party. In fact, during Ingersoll's public life, no one for whom Ingersoll declined to campaign, no Republican candidate for whom Ingersoll declined to campaign, ever attained the White House. So it was certainly interesting to come down Beverly Street today and see on the face of the building the proud sign of Center for Inquiry Toronto. I've been talking to Justin about fixing that spelling error, but you know. And next to it, an elephant. Almost an omen of the things to come. Well, I'm here today representing the Center for Inquiry Transnational, as we call it, in Amherst, New York. It's the headquarters of a movement that has created centers for inquiry in cities across the world, including most recently here in Toronto. Now, we plan to add a lot more centers, although I'm not saying explicitly that this is our vision for the future. Although, who knows? But we're here today to celebrate the great North American free thought orator Robert Green Ingersoll. Now let me tell you a little bit about Ingersoll. We're going to hear more than anyone could ever want to know about where he was born, so for now, just take it from me that he was. As Justin has noted, his father was a relatively conservative preacher, theologically conservative, but